Good afternoon, folks, and welcome to Breakout Room A, where we have Shannon Gray, Gokul Naidu, and Conrad Meneide here to talk about FinOps strategies in action. Folks, take it away.
All right, thank you, Jonathan. So to get started, thank you all for joining. My name is Shannon Gray. I'm an industry lead, go-to-market leader within Deloitte's consulting practice within cloud strategy. I'm joined here today by Gokul Naidu, Director of Cloud Operations, SaaS Cloud Operations, just to add in that part of the SaaS and part of our conversation. Sorry, we've had a lot going on today and we're just getting started. And also by Conrad Meneide, our VP of Infrastructure and Cloud at Kenvue. And to get started, basically, I'm been in IT for about 30 years now, primarily within cloud strategy. I help support our clients within our FinOps practice, leading a number of different engagements, primarily within financial services, but cross-industry. We talk a lot about cost-aware architecture. We have a lot of engagements right now around GenAI. Our Deloitte practice, right now we have over 330 certified FinOps practitioners. We have a number of certified engineers as well as certified professionals. As you can see, maybe not. I'm a certified professional. I've been doing this for a number of years. As we heard on the keynote this morning, I'm also an accidental FinOps practitioner. So I started out my career in technology. My role prior to Deloitte, I was the director of solution architecture and costing, so half my job was setting technical strategy. The other half of my job was the cost analysis therein, or what we call today TBM or FinOps. So I use that knowledge and experience with my clients across industries and hopefully help define cost-aware architectures and cost optimization going forward. And I'll turn it over to Gokul. If you can give a brief introduction of yourself. I think a lot of us know SAP, but we may not know SuccessFactors. So if you can give us a little background on what SuccessFactors does, and then if you can start with how SAP SuccessFactors got into cloud, some of your challenges there, and what the impetus was around all in on cloud.
Sure. Thank you, Shannon. Hey, guys. I'm Gokul Naidu. I do want to start with getting one legal thing out of the way. Whatever I say is my personal opinion and cannot be misinterpreted as something which is brought forward by SAP. So I work at SAP specifically on the SuccessFactors product, which is one of the line of business. What is SuccessFactors? It is human capital management solution. It's a global SaaS-based platform. We are across five continents. We have about 7,000 customers, 2,000 payroll systems. We are a HCM product, which means we have all the core HR software. We have things such as recruiting, talent, time management, payroll, and people analytics and more. Maybe I should start off with a question here. How many of you guys here have your companies migrated to the cloud? Maybe all in cloud? Show of hands. Couple? All right. And how many here are hybrid? Okay, one of them, all right. I'm sure some of you guys would have experienced or remember the time when it would take about 6 months to procure hardware. You guys remember that? Yeah? So I'm glad that we are over that phase. Typically, I remember if you were to get a hardware, and always some kind of a problem with it once you hook it up. People would blame the network guy, but it was never the network guy. So when we went on the cloud, Shannon, the challenge was we had to think about every single aspect of what would happen from a cost perspective. We of course had our deployment strategy, our migration strategy, and then what happens with financial planning. How do we even build visibility and awareness? How do we even build like FinOps 101 tagging? Like how do we do that? And what's the implication of having waste accumulated in your systems? So we had to think all those aspects, build automation into our systems, and we were literally starting from the scratch because we were previously an on-prem shop. So going from a CapEx-based model to an OpEx-based model, there was a change of mentality. If I move to the next slide. Yep, right there. So we moving to the cloud, this morning I heard someone talk about the movie reference, and I love movie references. I heard someone talk about Avengers, and I was thinking, like, what is the best movie reference that I can give for this talk? I guess I would have to come up with Everything, Everywhere, All at Once. Yeah, so it was exactly that. So I guess we're going to start with data-driven decision making. So how do we even go about building reliability, resiliency, scalability, and all those aspects into our systems? How much is it going to cost us? So we had to create that transparency. So if you see here on the left, we have all these key different inputs which were coming from the varied sources. Things such as our asset management database was one of the source, and then we had all these different sources from on target workloads, on regions, machine type, all coming from different cloud vendors. And we had to play around with almost like a scenario builder, right? And we had to give it a success factorize it, where you contextualize it in terms of the way our engineers, our product teams would understand it. And play around with scenarios. How much is, let's say, reliability, building reliability into our systems going to cost us, or scalability going to cost us? So we built that as a foundational layer, which helped us understand our data. And yeah, I mean, so we essentially built a dashboard, which was we put the data in the hands of the engineers, so they could look at it, they could play around with it, and make decisions accordingly. So this was one of the key, I guess, key input or foundational level aspect which was brought in from FinOps perspective. And what the other thing was, we had started off on a journey called coins. We'll touch upon that as well, where we essentially started to gather ideas across the board on how we should optimize our footprint on the cloud once we migrate onto a public cloud. Yeah, and of course, on top of it, to make it more fun, we of course had tight margin objectives. How do you stay within budget? So that was one other big theme.
All right, perfect. And what were some of the successes of adding FinOps to the cloud journey?
Yeah, so number one was we were able to get to the cloud in 12 months. It was a smooth transition. We avoided we avoided crash diet, essentially. But was it attributed to planning? Sometimes it's about going slow to go fast eventually. So our execution was 12 months, but before that, there was tons of planning which was done. And the planning aspect was involved things such as how long would the decommissions take? At what point do you purchase RIs? Like, how long does it take to get the builds done? And we're talking about our footprint, which is across 5 continents, right? So it's a pretty significant footprint in itself. To give you a little more idea of our footprint, we typically have about 1 billion transactions, roughly 1 billion transactions per day on our systems, right? So of course it impacts our customers as well. So we had to come up with ideas on how to minimize the impact on customers and also increase our speed for migration. Secondly, as a foundational activity, we were able to get a good sense of what are the different personas in our ecosystem. A persona, and that would mean essentially a requirement, an objective for a product manager versus an engineer versus operations versus finance would be totally different. So how do we establish those personas and make sure that we have KPIs which are aligned with them? And those KPIs would have to be aligned with their business, with our holistic business goals, with our holistic operations goals. So that was one. And then we were able to at least initiate partnership with different folks in the organization. So example, being a SaaS platform, it is important to us that we are able to give out we're at least able to understand how much a certain feature going to cost us, how much is a certain release going to cost us. So we were able to provide key inputs to our commercialization team in some cases as they go to market with a new feature, for example. And then remember that you shouldn't just look at the cost data, also look at the business data, because it's, at the end of the day, FinOps is about bringing business value. And as part of this journey, I do want to express my love for data science. And I learned as part of this journey, a lot of data is the king and the queen as they say. Data is everything. Data is the gold in this case.
Absolutely. I know you had Herculean challenges during that cloud migration, all in on cloud, get to par on the cost, and drive additional SaaS margins. It was a tough act to follow, but they made it happen all within 12 months. So congratulations to you and your team.
Thank you.
And as you can see, significant cost savings, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we get a lot further along in the journey here. But let's turn it over to Conrad, VP of Cloud and Infrastructure at Kenvue. Similar situation, I think a lot of people know Johnson & Johnson, but they don't necessarily know who Kenvue is. So Conrad, can you give us a little bit of background on the organization, your unique challenges that you had going to cloud?
Hello. Thank you, Shannon. So you stole my thunder. I was going to ask how many people here know Kenvue?
So
Just
sorry.
to see the hands. Just probably my Deloitte colleagues do. Want to put the slides up? So again, name's Conrad Meneide. I lead Cloud and Infra for Kenvue. Kenvue is just about a year old. We come from a rich history of about 135 plus years from our parent company, J&J. So we're really the consumer products division of J&J. I'm sure you all have used our products, Motrin, Listerine, Neutrogena, Tylenol, to name a few, Johnson's Baby, for those with small babies. So we started our journey about a year ago. We spun off from our parent company. And our purpose really at Kenvue is really to help our customers get healthy, right? Help everyone realize the extraordinary power of everyday care. And we do that via our purpose, for our values, 4 ways. We put people first, we care fiercely, we earn trust with science, and we solve with courage. Similar to Gokul, we all over the world, 165 plus countries, 1.2 billion customer lives. The challenge we really had as we spun off, how many people have been part of a divestiture? Mergers and acquisition? Right, imagine doing it with a cloud-first mindset, where the direction, the strategy from day 1, 2, 3 years ago was, Kenvue will not have a data center. We're going to migrate all 5,000 plus apps that sits all over the different regions. We're in North America, Latin America, EMEA, Asia Pacific, on-prem and in cloud, 5,000 plus to all 3 hyperscalers. Some of them lift and shift. So our challenges for me was really, I'll steal your analogy. I think I'm just thinking of a movie analogy. Since Gokul, you started this trend. What I could think of is the Matrix without the powers. We were living in 2 worlds, and the Matrix world weren't really giving me any power. I was just moving things as is. Because for those of you who raise your hands about having been part of a divestiture, there are legal and time constraints. You have to get it done at a specific time. So the mantra is always to get it done without optimization. Worry about that later. So that was one of our first challenges. 2 separate worlds, no power. Second challenge was really being no workload disposition strategy that was optimized. Really, we're like, our target state was if it was in a data center and it had a massive amount of CPUs and memory, we're going to shove it up in the cloud with a massive amount of CPU and memory. If it was running on VMware on the data center, we were just going to use lift and shift, VMware Cloud. So we really didn't have a disposition that leveraged a cost-aware architecture, our topic today, to land on the final disposition. And the third challenge was we really had limited visibility of cost. So imagine these 2 worlds. You got to pull data because we had really 3 cloud service providers. We had created applications that were managed for us, being managed by our parent company through a transitional service agreement, through a legal TSA, but it was our applications. Applications that were created for us, migrated over to us, being managed by us. So we really had to pull data from multiple places, multiple cloud service providers to get that granular cost transparency that we didn't have. So we immediately, success factors for us was I spun into action. I engaged my partner, Deloitte. First step was to, how do we optimize? How do we get better metrics on what we got? We can't optimize what we're not measuring. So we built an MVP of our cloud FinOps tool. Oh, by the way, I'm taking vote for names for our tool. We don't have a name for it yet. Metrics. So we sprung into action, right? And really got, we solved with courage, right? One of our values, get an MVP out, cost transparency. That was the first success. Second success was we wanted to pivot from, do we really want to be cloud first? We should really be cloud smart, right? There were things that we really were moving away from. There were certain applications that were going to be decommissioned long term. They were going to be replaced with SaaS or with some modernized capability. Why should we shove those up to the cloud? Doesn't solve our cost challenge. So we really leverage a combination of not just cloud, but also on-premise. We inherited a data center with the divestiture in North America, so we made that our North America and Latin data center. Then we had a number of colos in London, Singapore, and other places with our partners. So cloud first turned into cloud smart, defining workload placement disposition, and having cost transparency with the help of our partners, Deloitte.
Appreciate that. Can you share some additional successes on how you gained adoption through your hackathon?
Absolutely. Yeah, so, most of you in the room knows part of the challenge is culture. When I walked in and I said FinOps, people thought I was talking about a disease. No one knew what it was. So the first objective was to get cost awareness, to get understanding, to get engagement. And I really didn't want to do it by myself. I had a team of 2. I'm like, how am I going to get the word out? So I immediately sprung into action. My team kind of wanted to have a North America focus hackathon. We wanted to build a new engineering culture at Kenvue. So I thought, why not engage everybody? We're global. Let's be inclusive of the teams in China, the teams in Singapore, the folks in Brazil, right? The folks in Switzerland. We have developers and product teams and architects all over the world. So we launched into a hackathon with specific metrics we wanted to drive, right? Wanted to drive reusable value, speed to market, capabilities that we could leverage back into our tool. We wanted to drive recurring savings, year-over-year save. So really successful. The challenge for that was really getting it done across time zones, but the team pulled it off. So really a good way to get that led into us having what we now have cloud champions all over the world. And we now have monthly cloud governance with all these teams. And we have a funnel of ideas that these teams have provided that's in our backlog for our roadmap for our tooling.
Perfect. So we've talked a little bit about building cost-aware cultures. I'd like to pivot a little bit to cost-aware architecture. So Deloitte has a cost-aware architecture framework that you see on this slide. Really where we're pushing this on the top left-hand side is around, again, shifting left with FinOps, really focusing on cost avoidance versus cost recovery. So How do you do that ahead of time? What Gokul and Conrad have shared here, how do you pivot that so that you're understanding what those workloads are before you even provision them or build them, so that you truly understand what it is ahead of time? And really doing, again, that PMP mentality of 80% planning, 20% execution. If you can focus around that, you can build all your automation around that, and then work down towards what we call the service catalog, building all of your service components and the library therein. I think at last count, AWS had over 700 different products and services in addition to the other cloud providers. How do you simplify that? You can't just say, okay, engineers, go build anything that you want from this selection of everything. How do you simplify that for your environments, your engineers, build consistency within your organization to be able to support those technologies? Just like engineering does with programming languages, we really need to think of that from an architecture lens, enterprise-wide, end-to-end, and this does that. So we start with the components. We talk about full stack FinOps, and our next slide will go a little bit, actually we don't have that, we'll have that in the appendix. The full stack FinOps really articulates the fact that most of the practitioners that we meet, they really focus on the infrastructure layer only. So how do we right size? How do we get the right SKU size? But they don't go up the stack. How do we look at the application layer, the network layer, the storage layer? How do we look at what it costs to operate? And I know, Gokul, we've spent some time around building some of those soft costs in terms of the FTEs. One of the best use cases for Gen AI is the ability to provide efficiencies around what's the time saved. How do you calculate that and provide that back into your business value so you can tell that story long term? And for any use case, Gen AI is the topic du jour. I don't know if has anybody in the room not heard of Gen AI? I think it's everywhere we turn these days. So, and what will it be tomorrow? I'd spent a lot of time with quantum computing as well. It's a small subset right now, but what's the next technology tomorrow? Are you ready for it before it hits? And can you articulate the cost of it before you even build it? Following both frameworks for FinOps and TBM, and then all of the cost considerations that go on top of that. The service catalog really encapsulates what those services are and all of those cost considerations, going back to some of the things that Gokul will talk about in terms of unit metrics and how do you really get to that, the cost drivers within the applications and the workloads. So pivoting a little bit, we'll turn it back over to Conrad and start talking about how do you define cost-aware architecture within Kenvue.
Thank you. So for us, again, the challenge is how do we bring over 5,000 workload to Kenvue with cost in mind, right? So one of the first things for us was to focus on cost as a non-functional requirement, just like we think about security and supportability, scalability, just ensuring that costs became part of the conversation. One of our behaviors, I talk about a new company, one of our purpose, our values, one of our behaviors is having an owner mindset. So what that means is spending every dollar just like it was your own. Ties back to the frugal architecture concept, those of you who've read The Frugal Architect. How do we leverage, right, the behaviors of the new company, a year old, new culture, owner mindset, having a daring spirit. It's the second behavior of ours as we execute. Having an outside-in focus. How do we challenge the status quo? It's been done 135 years plus this way. Why are you making me do it that way, right? So we sprung into action again by figuring out how do we build. We built a Power BI interface into our FinOps tooling. For our migration as a service, we have a migration as a service capability, a team that now start getting into each of those applications and looking at disposition, target state disposition, where it's coming from and where it's going, right? Questioning things like, why are we not leveraging PaaS? Can it be containerized? What services are talking to what other services within this app? Why is it going to Azure and not AWS? Why not on-prem in our new so-called private cloud, the cloud smart approach, right? And if it can't be refactored, because Lord knows we all try to refactor things. Can we add it to a backlog? Can we tie it back to an enterprise architecture tech reference catalog for something we gotta address at a later date with an expiration date, have some governance around it. So that's kind of how we did it in terms of ensuring that, one, we tying back, we bringing cost to the table, to the dinner table. You know, as we design, measure, and optimize, we take the approach of not the cheap architect, the frugal architect. We leverage the new behaviors of our company and have an owner mindset. There's 3 behaviors: an owner mindset, a daring spirit, right, and an outside-in focus, and bring that to the table in the discussion. So really, that's how we did it.
Perfect. All right, we'll turn it over to Gokul. Talking about cost-aware architecture, and there's never any shortage of optimization opportunities. How do you prioritize that?
Yeah, so I guess it started off with us having to understand what's the baseline, so that we have something which can be measured to begin with. We initially got into discussion with our architects to understand how they are thinking about it. Right? Typically, if we were to talk to architects, they would say, yeah, I mean, the way I architect my systems is, like a typical answer would be, I have about 10,000 users. So 10,000 users translates into 8,000 transactions per second. So I need 8 CPUs. I mean, and let's say the application is, let's say, making this up like Java-based or, whatever program language it's based on. So let's say it's a CPU hogging or a memory hogging machine. Right, so that would kind of vary on how the architects would think about their applications. But then it's still an important data point because it gives you an understanding of what is the business data that you need to connect it with. So in some certain cases, we looked at transaction data, the number of users that come into our system, number of unique users that come into our systems. We have to look at varied data references to figure out, because this eventually goes to the direction of unit costing. So it was a good data point that we collected on the different varieties of applications. We call it the application profile. And then secondly, it was about how do you get to unit cost, something which which at least evokes reasonable confidence. So we came up with a measurement called user density index. The way we went about it was we did a correlation analysis, regression analysis, just basic regression analysis, figuring out R-square, p-values, to see what kind of variables are dependent on let's say how the costs increase. So once we arrived at that, so for us it was I'm talking about one of the products. So for at least for one of the product was user density index, and we could benchmark that as a typical for a SaaS-based platform where it's about how many users can you pack into systems. So we could measure, let's say I can pack, and we gave it to the index, right? So let's say if the index is 5, so that means I can pack about 10,000 users into my systems. But how would the benchmark vary across different regions and different applications? So that was a good benchmark for us to begin with. And then thirdly, we came up with this, what you're seeing here on the slide is coins. To tie it with user density index, we wanted to have some sort of an easy way of measuring for the engineers some of the unit cost. So example, there were phases within this. There are 4 phases. The number 1 was business goals and architecture alignment, which is essentially making the lives of architecture teams easy so they can clearly understand like what is the cost of increase in number of transactions, cost of increase in number of users, things of that nature. And then, because then you're truly tying things to the business value, let's say if you're rolling out a new product or a new feature in the market, you could figure out how much is a transaction going to cost you. And then secondly, value and efficiency alignment. That's where we talk about the true FinOps aspect of things, right? Once you have the forecast, then how is it if you're putting an architecture out there, is it efficient enough from a FinOps lens? And third is, since this was an idea gathering mechanism initially, when we got out of the on-prem systems to the cloud, We of course knew that we were going to have headroom. We need to do optimization. So this was a way for us to gather ideas across the organization. So we got tons of ideas across the organization, and we of course eventually had to prioritize it. So we went about looking at what takes the greatest time and the least investment, greatest time or greatest investment, right? The 4 buckets that you see here. It's kind of similar to the iron triangle, right? So of course the ones which are least time, least investment go first. And yeah, eventually execution and measurement. And this is it may seem straightforward, but guys, this is probably one of the most important phase because you need to give credit to your engineers. I mean, I have gotten calls where engineers would tell me, like, hey, so you asked us to look at something, but you never gave us credit. You never sent out that email. You never told our bosses that we are doing something about some of the wastage that you have in your environment. Nobody typically wants to look at, which is things such as wastage, because it's like something which is sitting on a corner and nobody wants to ever clean it. But we are doing something about it. So this is probably the most important phase, I would say, out of all of this, making sure that engineers get credit at the end of the day.
Well, and you really built a lot of goodwill in the early stages as well, having stakeholder interviews and listening to their concerns, right?
Yeah, with our architectural pattern building that we did, with the application profiles that we built, it was all revolving around understanding like how they are thinking about, what their thinking process is, and also help them back up things with data.
Yeah, like you said, data is king and queen, right? Yes. All right, next we'll pivot a little bit to shifting FinOps left. Again, moving more towards that, how do we avoid the cost before we actually incur it? I know at Deloitte, we are really trying to drive that behavior. Like Gokul said, transparency, bringing data to the table, and reallocating. Like this is a good use case around GenAI as well. How do you make sure that you prioritize the use cases that you have and not spend additional money on R&D on the shiny new toy? So that you can reallocate those resources to other more important things. Additional FTEs, more innovation. There's never any shortage of work in any organization. So how do you make that the most efficient use of your resources across the board? So Gokul, how do you define shifting left, and how would that have helped you in your cloud journey when you went all in on the cloud?
I think key for us was coins, as when it was created, was supposed to be an idea generation mechanism, but it became like a continuous, sustainable process. Because we of course always give credit to our engineers, and of course thank you again all my engineers who who are here. But yeah, coins, I guess FinOps. I mean, as they say, if security is day 0, FinOps is day 0.5. So we had to embed some of that design thinking, cost consciousness as part of the design journey. Like when you are thinking about building a new feature or product, cost has to be part of the conversation. Cost has to be the pillar. Yeah, so that was one. And I guess secondly, just strengthening your data with not just looking at cost, but also the business aspect of things.
Yeah, I think that's key. I know in one of my prior lives, all of my architects were required to provide not only the architecture solution diagram, but also the cost analysis that went with that so that we could prioritize across initiatives. Turning to Conrad at Kenvue, how do you define shifting FinOps left, and how would it have helped, or how is it helping you now?
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with Gokul. I think a grassroots movement, bottoms up. Again, for us and those of you who've divested, it's not always about optimizing. Sometimes it's about getting it out, getting it done within 12 months, exiting, get to the finish line, and optimize once it's yours, right? So for us, the way we solve that is by, number one, leveraging, again, partnership with Deloitte, getting metrics, right? Getting cost transparency and visibility. We started out with a Power BI dashboard. Now we have a full stack tool. Getting that visibility so that by executive, by line of business, supply chain, commercial, R&D, corporate technology and data, those are our product teams. everybody can now, from a granularity perspective, drill down into that data and see that consumption. So first, show them the money, right? Get visibility. Then you can build that momentum. Get the folks who participated in the hackathon to be champions, to be mavens, to bring ideas forward, right? Leveraging, as a new company, we are a year old. We have a 135-plus year history with J&J, our parent company, but we are a year old as Kenvue. So it's like a new baby, right? We really got to tie it back to our OKRs in terms of being competitive. How can we be competitive 2 years from now? What's our TCO going to be when we fully stand alone? So really taking that kind of high-level view and then drilling down into, why are you running a server that was in the data center this big in the cloud? Why can't you optimize as we go? Does it really need to be could you choose SaaS versus IaaS? Can it be a PaaS capability? So I think having the data created the dialogue, shifting this cost left as a non-functional requirement, and then engaging everybody. I mean, I know you're all tired of hearing it's a team sport. It is a team sport. So really leveraging data, engaging folks, having high collaboration, and then building that engineering culture, to your point, to ensure that the developer, the persona-based capabilities are delivered based on feedback that we get from our stakeholders.
Perfect. We'll pivot slightly to the benefits of building this cost-aware architecture. So again, simplifying your architecture, simplifying your landscape throughout the environment, driving your technical strategy. So how do you balance between technical debt, driving innovation, and staying, where you need to be? One example for GPT 3.5, for example, is there's a use case out there that GPT 3.5 was able to predict interest rates. Using that particular version, GPT 4.0 is out, but why would you need to go to the additional cost if you don't need to? Just because there is additional technology out there, you need to really balance what the requirements are. And going back to what Conrad was saying on those non-functional requirements, balancing the requirements with your cost. You don't go to the car lot and ask for any car off the lot. You go with a particular set of requirements in mind. Do you have a family of 6 or a family of 1? Are you looking for a commuter car or a truck? Those are your requirements, and you balance that with a budget. You don't just say, here's an open blank check. You usually try to negotiate that cost, and technology is no different. So with that said, we'll pivot slightly to current state. What are you working on today, and what do you see in the future? We've got about 5 minutes left, and we'll wrap it up with what are you doing within your organizations, and what do you think personally where FinOps is going to go? And we'll start with Conrad.
Yeah, so for us, it's really moving beyond this crawl phase. We're starting to walk now. Hopefully, we can run soon. So we went from a no data, no visibility, crawling, to where we have a tool. It took us we have our own tool we built. We've right-sized those low-hanging fruits. I call them those box of chocolates, right? Just SKU optimization. We've gone from, right-sizing disk, unused disk, unattached disk. Just huge amount of savings over the last 12 months just by taking some of those actions. I tell my team and I tell the company when I come here to FinOps X, I didn't leave my water running at home, and I didn't leave my lights on. And what we were doing for the last 2 years, non-prod environments were running all the time, and they're not in use on the weekend. So we shut all those down. So we've taken those box of chocolates, those low-hanging fruits, and yield a lot of value for Kenvue. So next, right, we wouldn't be a FinOps conference if we don't talk about AI. How do we leverage data? Data's the new goal. How do we leverage it to forecast, to predict, tie back to our observability platform that we're also building, leveraging utilization data and all the operational data to make better real-time decision, to optimize on demand, where folks don't have to have a Jira story on their backlog to optimize. Optimization can be a click on the portal. So that's kind of where we want to be when we get to that. I think JR talked about it this morning, and that crawl, run, walk, run phase, and capabilities moving across, that phase. So that's kind of where we're going.
Perfect. And Gokul? Current
Yeah.
state and future state.
Yeah, I guess from a current state perspective, we do want to continue going in our journey, looking at Gen AI, ML. I mean, it's incomplete if I don't say that. So we do look at, so as I said, we do look at like regression modeling, so we have a good clean data at this point right now, which took a while for us to get there. So I guess we will probably also be looking at pattern matching, things such as unsupervised learning. I mean, we have a good sense of, I guess, supervised learning, right? Since we have good labeling and things of that nature. Unsupervised learning to match business contextual data with cost data. And secondly is leverage focus so that we can reduce some of the additional overhead effort that we have with normalization.
Perfect. That's all we have for our session. Thank you so much to our panelists. If you have any questions, please let us know, and please visit the Deloitte booth at booth G15.
That's a huge round of applause.
Thanks for watching. Check out more FinOps X 2024 content on our YouTube channel on the 2024 playlist. Support our channel by liking, subscribing, clicking the notification bell, and by leaving comments and questions for our speakers. We appreciate your support.